See, always works. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this part 2 of our CIO Roundtable series. This week, we will be focusing on the community college and their response to the pandemic and all that's going on at this point. Before I turn it over to Carol Thomas, our host, wanted to talk a little bit about expectations for the call. We will walk through and hear from a number of panelists around their response, and we ask that everyone remain on mute during the speaking to cut down on background noise. You guys should be muted at this point. If you do have any questions during the topics or as they're going around, please feel free to add those to the chat window. There is a chat icon at the bottom of the screen that you can click on and then send a chat to the entire group. If the question is not answered in real time or in moment, we will certainly try and circle back, as I know Carol will try and save some time at the end for questions. And if we ultimately don't get to it, we're more than okay to send a written response as well after the fact. So definitely want to make sure that all questions are at least responded and answered. We will be recording this session, so feel free to take notes, but you will also have the dialogue to reference back to in the future. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Carol Thomas.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the CIO Roundtable. As Stephen said, I'm Carol Thomas. I'm Senior Vice President of Professional Services at Forelli, and one of my areas of responsibility is our leadership practice. So I'm delighted that we're able to offer this virtual roundtable to support conversations on important topics for our profession. I'm happy today to see some long-term acquaintances and some newer acquaintances around this table, this virtual roundtable. And today, specifically, we've gathered community college technology leaders to have a conversation about how they and their institutions are responding to the unprecedented challenges in the world today. As we consider the past, and I ask myself on a regular basis, was it only March when we turned on a dime? And we think about the present, where the uncertainties of the environment are challenging us all as innovators and leaders. And then turn to the future, we know we are unlikely ever to return to what it was like even a few short weeks ago. So today, we have opportunities to work together in new and unique ways. Collaboration and support were never more important. And so thank you for all who participate today in what will continue to be important conversations about navigating these times. Our contributors today have much to share. So I'd like to turn the conversation over to them, starting with Dwight Fisher from Onondaga Community College. Dwight?
Thanks, Carol. Good morning, everyone. I'm the Vice President and CIO at Onondaga Community College in Syracuse, New York. It's a school with 8,000 students, at least before. We're not sure how many students will be there later or what the makeup will be, but many of the students come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and educational opportunity is central to what we do. When we started planning for the pandemic, we were thinking spacing our computer labs, setting up cleaning stuff, but then things started moving rapidly, and we did the flip. And suddenly our chief areas of focus had to be getting computers and viable technologies into the hands of instructors, staff, and students. We got hotspots. We got as many as we could right away. The demand soared for them. It was very limited in how many we could get. And I sit on the executive council, and we were meeting with the president. We've met every day at 9 o'clock, 1 hour at least, talking about how we're supporting faculty and stuff. But for my staff, we suddenly, instructional design went from a backwater area to front and center. We were already, many of our applications have been in the cloud and online. We just flipped over to Office 365 a year ago, and that was the best thing we ever done, because we suddenly had, world-class tools to be able to do this flip. And then suddenly video conferencing is really big. So we stayed a couple steps ahead. We've been using Teams internally, but Zoom was just taken off. We wanted to keep our faculty in Teams to stay within the Office 365 environment, but we also had to use Zoom for anything that was happening outside. I work with a school that's part of the SUNY State University System of New York. They asked right away, what schools, what do you need for laptop computers? Because they were going to buy some. I didn't even flinch. I said 500. A lot of schools just asked for maybe 20, maybe 30. We got 250, and they all ended up in our receiving. So we've got 250 Dell Latitude laptops that we can loan out through the library. The library is now part of our area too. We're loaning laptops to faculty, staff. Another thing we did was we ramped up the number of VPN licenses we had so we could make sure that everybody that had to work from home, the administrators and staff, could connect securely and continue to do that work. Some of the challenges, again, we had a lot of people that are using computers at home that they thought might work, but really was a real challenge. They were sharing computers. These are older computers. They didn't have webcams. So we loaned out computers to those who needed them most. We also set up parking lot wireless for students thinking that they might need to get it, but that really never materialized. We knew that some students were working from home and they did the best they could, but they kind of dropped off. Some of the insights we gained in this process, the cloud first strategy paid off. Office 365 paid off. IT was ready with the tools in place, and as soon as it appeared that we were doing the instructional design, we leveraged that because we also had this new initiative that was SUNY mandated for electronic information and technology access. So we melded instructional design and electronic access together. So now we have a very integrated team of instructional design with library faculty, my staff, and the staff from the teaching center. So we also have Ally that's now plugged into Blackboard. So we learned a lot. We're still in this. We're doing online courses this summer. Staff and administrators are returning to campus next week. And now our new business is protocols, screening, making sure people have the tools in place to take care of those who are on campus. So I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of others that probably have some good ideas, but that's what we've been doing. Thank you.
So Dwight, I have a question for you that's coming from one of our guests today, and that is about the loaner program. Did you circulate those loaners to students as well as faculty and staff?
Yeah, we had also a Barnes and Noble group. We've been doing box of books. So when the students come in the fall, they could get a Chromebook on top of all their books. So we had 500. We had loaned out 400 of them, but those are rather minimalist machines. Yes, we loaned out over 150 of those Dell laptops, mostly to students, but many to faculty and staff who are dealing with subpar equipment. And the library is already set up with a loaner system to accommodate all that.
Sure, thanks for that. And I'm actually, since we have a little bit more time allotted for you, Dwight, I'm just curious about the instructional design component of what you mentioned. I saw that too in institutions that I was engaged with, that to your point, instructional designers had kind of been in a back office, reached out to and certain, when certain activities needed to be undertaken. But this was a real, this is a real pressure cooker for them at this point to keep faculty, moving forward in an online environment. Were there strategies that you employed or approaches that you took? Did you have to increase your capacity? How did that work?
Well, to be fair, it's not like we went online. We went to remote delivery. But most of what we dealt with our single person in instructional design was first-time users of Blackboard. Now these are the faculty that have been ignoring this for years, and suddenly they had to use it. So it's not like we were dealing with the advanced the other strategy we had is we do have some advanced faculty members that help themselves and they help the others. So we took care of the laggards, and those at the forefront helped themselves and their other colleagues. So the combination of that, but now our instructional design team is 5+. And the library faculty who were not part of this before and didn't want to be part of instructional design, now they need to be. They are faculty. This is their new role. We kind of drag them kicking and screaming, but this is their new normal. In fact, the library now, it's a whole new function, which is a loaner equipment, and that's not going away anytime soon.
Right. Well, like we said at the start, we're not going back to the same old, and this is really a kickstart. Unfortunately, had to come this way, but it's very interesting to see that happening. Thank you, Dwight, and really appreciate it. I'm going to turn over now to Kent Brooks from Casper College, and let Kent take the floor and share his experiences.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Good to see everybody virtually, and good to see some familiar names and faces. I've shared a little bit of this at the beginning, but my experience was a little bit different. When all this really, the day that I've seen listed as the pivot day on this, when everybody started thinking it was serious, was March 11th, and so I was actually I was on my way to Brazil March 11th for the beginning of about a 10-day tour. I was speaking on IT management to a couple of Brazilian colleges, a technical college and a university in southern Brazil. We had some ag professors who were going with us who were sharing some things. And so literally from the time that I took off in Casper to the time that I landed and drove to Rio do Sul, Brazil, things really changed rapidly. My full 10-day agenda started being canceled immediately. We had a reception that night, it was canceled. The college where we were going to go set up and do some recordings and that sort of thing started shutting down the next day. And so it was really shortly thereafter that I started being in communication with my staff, because, you know, just like everybody else, we shut down a few days later while I was still in Brazil. The amazing part of it to me is still the connectivity. You know, I was still just a cell phone call away. We did a couple quick video meetings while I was down there. And so I really started working with my team. And fortunately, I've got a really good team. We're broken out into desktop. I mean, probably similar to what everybody else is doing. I've got coordinators for my desktop group, my networking group, and my enterprise group. And, you know, a couple of my folks there obviously really did just a fantastic job. We had talked about a couple things briefly before I had left, but, you know, because you're just starting to get clues of people being really nervous about, you know, what happens if you have to go online and that sort of thing. And I think in many ways a lot of the things we've been doing the last several years prepared us as good as you can be prepared for crazy. You know, we were already a Google Apps environment. We already had an enterprise license for Zoom, which, you know, served us well. We used the Google Meet tool for our internal IT meetings. About a year ago, our distance learning folks, they actually began setting up Moodle shells for every class, whether they were using it or not. And so that's something. So when it all came time to go online, that was really a key thing that allowed us to be ready. Even with some things that I was like the old grumpy IT guy about this past year, we rolled out Campus Logic previously earlier in the year to do some automation for our financial aid services. Because again, you know, all along we're still, I mean, obviously we're thinking about serving the students right there, but you're still moving forward going, well, if we're really going to be able to, are we going to be able to do school next year? And if that's the case, what's happening with financial aid? Well, doing some of those things set us up pretty well, even from our student services side, in terms of processing financial aid and some of those things. I think the one thing, and it's a project we have on our list for July 1, if we had a weak spot, it was probably e-signature. We weren't really ready to do that, and so we've been in conversations with everybody from Adobe Sign to DocuSign to AssureSign to whoever else signs stuff. You know, and working to tie it into our document image. You know, we were wanting to not just do some ad hoc solution, and so if anything we didn't do well during this, it's probably that. Even a lot of the things that I, you know, have already heard this morning, we did set up and recommend locations on our campus for people to come to the parking lot for wireless access for the students that had it. You know, we may have seen one or two instances of that being utilized. I think in terms of equipment checkout, we really probably had more faculty and staff checkout than anything. There was a pool, and just to kind of give you an idea, I mean, I guess you know, we have 400 or 500 employees, about 4,500 students. I think we ended up checking out 28 laptops. Continuing Ed had some other laptops in one of their carts that we checked out. I see a question. Our ERP. We're a colleague shop. Right, is the answer to what our ERP is. So. We did provide a handful of mobile hotspots. That's one thing we had to go out. And of course, there was almost an immediate shortage of those. We went out and bought 5 extra and provided, you know, we provided those on an as-needed basis. Our licensing for our VPN needs, we had sufficient licensing for that. I think the biggest need for students was for students in some of like our GIS, SolidWorks, some of those softwares that are really need workstation class machines. That was the one place where students at home probably didn't have enough computing power, and so we were able to provide those virtually. You know, and so I mean like I say, it was in the whole scheme of things is a relatively small number. I think we checked, like I said, I think we checked out a total of 28 laptops. Our library had some checkout laptops, about 20 that were checked out. We probably.
So
yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second? So you mentioned that for the SolidWorks folks that couldn't run it on their home machines, you provided a virtual environment. What kind of virtual environment did you provide?
You know, we utilized, and I'm blank on the name. We had licensing that was in place with those are all HP workstation class machines, and it was the licensing that HP provided with their workstation class machines, which allowed us to not have to buy any additional licensing.
Right.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say that's been an ongoing question and dialogue that's come up in a number of these sessions, is the question about when you're providing virtual environments, what does that look like? Is it an AWS environment? Is it an Azure environment, running Windows Virtual Desktop? And in sort of the proof of concept that we actually talked about for some time in last week's CIO Roundtable with another group. So very interesting approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to
worked well.
ask you to
better than I thought it was going to be. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kent. I'm going to move on to our next participant, so I make sure that everybody has a good amount of time to contribute. We'll certainly come back for questions and additional comments. But Hampton Scheib, I think you are next on the list, so I'd really welcome you from Hines Community College.
Thank you. I'm glad to be visiting with everyone this morning. I think that what we have experienced, it mirrors what I've heard already. I think that where we have done well is in areas where we were forward thinking over the past few years, and we were planning for things to change, but we really thought we were on more of a 3 to 7 or 10-year cycle, and everything was simply compressed. So nothing innovative about moving stuff to the cloud, nothing innovative about trying to get laptops into the hands of all faculty. We did make a commitment 3 years ago to use a significant amount of grant money to attempt to get every faculty member equipped with a nice touchscreen laptop, and felt like that was the right thing to do in terms of why do we want to give them a desktop in the classroom, in their office, maybe give them a laptop as well. Why not equip them with one very high quality laptop that can serve all environments? We were already doing about 1/3 of our instruction online. So overall, the tech stack was very solid for us to be able to pivot the rest of instruction online. Probably the biggest challenge that we experienced in that area, it was less about the availability of the technology, and it was really more around the change management of people adopting the technology. So we had an incredible outpouring of kindness and patience and grace from a lot of our faculty, who the 30-year-olds and the 50-year-olds are helping the 70 and 80-year-olds and had some wonderful success stories in that area, and had people that were willing to hang in with instructors that had not done any online teaching and really stand by their side and make sure that we were staying student focused. And that was by and large successful. You know, did we have incredible outcomes for the spring? It's hard to know. Did we complete the spring and do it in as minimally disruptive a way as possible? I do think so. I think that one thing that I've observed is that the way that we have typically thought about the institution would have our facilities at the very foundational element. We think about our campuses, we think about our buildings. Well, that's where the employees come to work. It's where the students come to sit in the classrooms. It's where the faculty have their offices. It's where student services are. And then online education seemed to be an extension of this pre-existing physical plant that we've had for 100 years. And then we go through this COVID transformation, and there's been a complete inversion of that. And suddenly it's the digital stack that is the foundation of the institution. I'm one of the very few people that is back on campus. That's going to change over the coming weeks. But how is it that we're able to suddenly keep going without this physical presence? It's really changed the way that I've thought about the facilities. And so if you think about it from a value prop perspective, there are a lot of reasons that people come to Hines. We have about 12,500 credit, another 7,500 non-credit, 1,100 full-time, 600 part-time employees, 6 campuses, a lot of other sites, a large distributed organization. So people come to Hines for a lot of different reasons. Same reason they go to community colleges all across the country. They're either coming for credits, they're coming for credentials, they're coming for knowledge. They might be coming for a certain athletic offering of ours. We have a band. They might be coming for that. They might want to just live on campus. They might want community. So if you take all these different value prop elements, you can begin to line them up with which of these stacks are they dependent on? Is getting credit hours or a credential, does that require the physical plant? Well, we've proven it doesn't. Does being in the band require the physical plant? Absolutely it does. So suddenly this inversion in the stack has caused us to think about things very, very differently. So the frontier that we're starting to see now is that while we might be able to overcome some of these centralized facility issues, in many ways they're now distributed, because we can take our offerings online, but it does not mean that our students have the devices and the connectivity that they need to access that content. So solving an institutional issue is more within our reach than solving a statewide issue. And we're really starting to come up against that right now. So I think the areas where we've done well is where we were forward thinking. We were never planning for a pandemic, but we absolutely saw change coming. So what I mentioned earlier, moving to cloud, faculty devices, moving so much to online instruction, that was very, very, I'm glad we did that now. It's really paying off. The areas where we have been cautious over the years, I think is where it's hurting us. Making sure that we had some kind of one-to-one device program for students. We've just never been confident about moving in that area. And now I see that as a real weakness. So I think going forward for Hines and probably a lot of community colleges across the country, I think that our success is less about what we're gonna do that's new and different. I really think it's more about what are we going to be willing to let go of that's no longer working? Because I think that's what's really holding us back. I think that for the first time ever, I can confidently say that so many of the tools and the techniques that we've wanted for so long, they're really here in front of us right now. But do we have the courage and the gumption to let go of the things that are holding us back and really step into these new worlds? And I think I'm seeing both of those things play out in our environment right now. So I cautiously say that even though I'm very concerned about the institution and the health of the institution, I think that what's going on is an acceleration of an inevitable and possibly a much needed paradigm shift in higher ed overall. So I'm embracing this, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Hines is aligned with what our students need and what the state of Mississippi needs.
Hampton, thank you so much for those really astute observations about what's really going on in this environment right now that is so, you know, we read about the uncertainty, we feel the uncertainty, but your observations are really very, very, have been helpful to me in terms of thinking this through. Really appreciate them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to ask the panelists to think about a question while I introduce our next and final presenter. The question is really about retention and are new things happening in the retention space for you? Are you using the same tools, just more and maybe in new and different ways? So we'll come back to that question, but just wanted to prime the pump a little bit. I'm very happy at this point to introduce Michael Chacon from the College of Western Idaho, where he serves as the Chief Information Officer. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, you're quite welcome. This is interesting. The most first I'd like to say is it's nice to know that we're doing similar things and getting good results out of it. So it kind of validates that we're doing the right things to get things going again. I think from our perspective, it's important for us to understand context. I think what Hampton said is really important. This is really a cultural shift that we're working through. And some people don't want to do it and some people do, but this is accelerating things to where that's just is going to continue to go. So finding the positives of how to move forward and transfer knowledge to the students, this is a great opportunity to really look at that and see what that happens. We're a relatively new school, we're only 10 years old. So we don't have this 100-year thing that we have to move away from. So it helps a little bit. But one thing we're doing, as I mentioned before, I've been a consultant most of my life, not from higher education. So I'm learning to deal with the differences in higher education than what I've seen in the business world, which is a little more pragmatic. But that said, it's still the same thing. We have customers, they're students. They have a choice. They want to be able to, you know, we have to provide value for them to be able to come to us. And so our cultural context that we're going through, which may not make sense here, but we are going through an agile transformation. I have been, in my consulting world, been doing agile since around 2000, so almost a long time, 20 years. I'm an old guy, and been using it in businesses to help organizations get function. So when I talk about agile, I'm talking about it in the business context, not the technical context. How do we prioritize and refine and make decisions and choose what not to do, which is really, Hampton, what you had mentioned, what didn't we do? Well, we have to be very intentional about what we're not going to do, so we can focus on what we're going to do, so we can do it really well. We don't particularly call it agile, we call it our business operational framework, because then you don't have to explain why you're doing a technology approach to things. And to support that, we have a centralized data store of all of the work of all of the teams throughout the school, and been working on this for a couple of years. So all of our cross dependencies and impediments are visible, they're clear. So all of the work that's being done by each department that affects other departments, we meet on a regular basis every week for, you would call it a scrum of scrums. I don't know how many are familiar with Agile, but basically it's just a meeting to talk about dependencies and be able to let teams do the work. So we really try to push the decision-making down as far as possible into the organization, and the executives spend their time removing impediments and trying to help them get their job done, because they know what to do. So that what's interesting, and the reason I bring it up, the fact that I'm always talking about it, is that that framework we've been working on for a couple of years has really helped, because when we all bugged out and moved, we still had all that infrastructure. We still had those meetings. They went to Zoom. We still could look at the dependencies and all the priorities of the school. So it really helped just keep things moving. So it was interesting, and it worked really well. We had to distribute some laptops. I think we were more like we only had 30 we distributed. Again, it's in the library. And we identified essential personnel, which initially was no one, but then we had labs from the classes that were finishing up in the spring. So we had to spend time building protocols. How do we set the labs up? How do we sanitize them? How do we clean them up after each student use and all of that? And it worked so far. It's worked out fairly well. Our spring went fine. We took the spring break and extended it a week, and took those 3 weeks to put all of the content online. They took the live stuff and put it online, so they didn't really have instructional design to make it online, because as we know that it's a little different, but it worked fine. Everything went really smooth. And we had made some investments, luckily, in our infrastructure and the wireless, not like my wireless at home, but the wireless at school is working really well. And for distance learning, we built, put a bunch of VPNs in and built it all out. So it worked out pretty well. We have Blackboard as well. We're college shop. We have Blackboard. And so a lot of the instructors have been using Blackboard, and it's been fine. In fact, we're putting Blackboard in the cloud today. We have the next week. We just finished our spring semester. So that will be helpful as well. And then Zoom came out like everyone else. It was like, oh, it's all over the place. So we used Blackboard for most instruction, but some instructors wanted to use Zoom. So what we did is created a real quick and dirty pilot with about 30 instructors. And we're figuring Zoom out, the waiting rooms and all of that. And that's been working really well. The students like it. They like the interaction with the instructor. And so we're thinking about, as we move forward, to keep the physical distancing in the classrooms, is kind of have some of the students on Zoom and some in the classroom. Basic, technical training, we would do that. That way we can have fewer students in the classroom by keeping our students up, because we need the income, right? We don't want to lose that. And then kind of cycling the students through. So one day, one group will be in the class, another day, the other ones will be on Zoom, and see how that works. And also identify, some people prefer to use the remote. They have no problem with it. So we can identify that. So moving forward, that's what we're doing. So our summer registrations, I think, are just 1% under from last year, which is good because we still have people coming in. We have about 30,000 students. But the good thing we don't have a residence, we don't have sports, we don't have to deal with a lot of issues that the other schools have to deal with. So luckily, our bond levy did not pass for us to build another building. So now we're, okay, well, this is good, this will work. And what I really want to do is really market the community college as, look, you don't want to spend all that money to send your kid to a four-year school where they're going to get sick, and you don't want to do it online and spend all that money. So why not just come to a community college and save your money, be safe, do all that, and then you can matriculate to another school, because no one really cares what school you enter, they care what school you come out of. So
Right.
we're a little reluctant.
It's almost like the best of both.
They what?
It's almost like the best of both worlds. The best
Right.
of both worlds is they can do it online or in the classroom.
But see,
So
I'm
social distancing approach. Yeah, very interesting.
I'm not the most cautious person in the
Sorry
world.
to cut you off, Dave. Did you
That's
have anything
okay.
else you wanted to say?
But some of the people are concerned that will annoy, I was going to say another word, but annoy the four-year schools. But, you know, they annoy us all the time. So, so things have gone well. We just had our nurses graduation last weekend, and we did those, you've seen them on TV, a drive-by. So, you know, everyone was sitting there, and we had music blaring out. We had a local radio station simulcast the talking so people can listen to it in the cars, and just, you know, honking horns and doing all that kind of stuff. And it was really, the students really liked it. It was, you know, an interesting way to deal with that. So we are planning on going full bore in the fall, which I'm very nervous about, but it's not my call. So what we are doing though is we won't have that 3-week gap in the spring. So we are taking all of our content and preparing for online, and we're setting the expectation with the students that we're going to go online, do all the, you know, CDC stuff. But if there is a resurgence or a flare-up, be prepared to go online on a, you know, flip of the switch. So I think there's not much else we can do other than that. Our concern is the quality, you know, to Hampton's point, is the quality of the education. It's a different way to convey information. We don't want to just have them go through the information and get a grade and go out. We really want to transfer knowledge. So that's something that we need to do. We need to get more instructional designers. And we're looking at remote labs and things like that. But one thing I'd like to point out that we did that no other school in Idaho did, we had no furloughs at all in our school. And the way we did that is, well, it's an agile thing. Oh, Robert's there, he's gonna laugh at me. But there's something called technical debt, but we call it operational debt. Because again, I want to focus on the whole business aspect of it. So some people's jobs required their physical presence at the school to interact with students, labs, and things like that. Well, they couldn't do their work. So what we did is identify, I don't know if you're familiar with operational debt or technical debt. It's just stuff you should have done a while ago and didn't do, and it's on your list. It's kind of like the list you have in your refrigerator to go clean the garage, basically. So to work on all of that, so we identified all of the operational debt in the organization, and then we kind of mapped it to the capabilities of the people who couldn't, you know, do their regular job. And so what we did is we assigned that work through that centralized tool so everybody could keep working and keep producing and providing value to the institution, and to the tool we could actually measure the progress. So when we present to our board, because we kept asking, why aren't you furloughing people? Everyone else is furloughing because we don't want to. We want to be able to keep, you know, things going. So that has kind of been a unique thing, I guess, in Idaho anyway, is that we are actually providing value of things that have not been done and keeping people productively, busy and not having to do that. So that's kind of our approach to things. And I didn't want to say the same things everyone else said, so I kind of talked about that, but that's kind of how we have handled things.
I really appreciate the notion of operational debt. I had also coined that term for myself when I was doing some technical assessments, and I was noticing that the difference is not just in technical investment, but also in the investment in the people and the processes to make things work. So that's very, very interesting. Thank you, Michael. And I want to come back to the question about retention. So I think the question read, let me read it. Tom is interested in the panelists' extra efforts concerning student retention, or were current processes just more heavily used? If you have insights into that, I think that's a question that's sort of top of mind for many of us as we think about both the completion rates for the spring semester, but the retention of students into subsequent semesters. Any thoughts?
I have a couple ones. I'd say we're doing more of what we have started to do with Title III money. We have what's called a one-team group that anybody that applies gets somebody assigned to them, but we're also really reaching out to the current students now, because it's critical that we get a percentage of them to come back. In fact, this is a serious problem for our community college. It's just the disappearance of the second-year student. So we're using text messaging tools. We're using Starfish analytics, or the Starfish early alert tool, significantly to keep tabs on them. So everything we can to just keep in touch with them.
Thanks, Dwight. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
At Casper, I know our student services made a more of a concerted list of a concerted effort to, assign groups of students to a person, and they did specifically, check in with them, give them a call, that sort of thing. And obviously, the last year or two, we've been kind of focusing on even on our CRM and making sure we maximize. This is just a personal philosophy, but it seems to me we often buy a tool and then we don't try to squeeze every ounce of utilization out of it. We usually go buy some other shiny thing, and so we've been making a concerted effort to try to do that better. But I think there was a little bit more hands-on stuff, in terms of groups of students being assigned to a person, and them really, as part of their day during all of this, as they're out calling those students. And I don't know that always happens, I think maybe a little more high touch, is via just giving them a call, how are you doing, that sort of thing. So some of that stuff has been going on, and I think we've kind of at least maybe started seeing some of that bounce from the larger universities too, that Michael just mentioned. And I think that's a real possibility as we head into the fall. People not wanting to leave and just spend the high dollars to go take a class from somebody they don't know, who probably, and this isn't always the case, who probably isn't doing online as well as maybe some of our institutions who've been really engaged in it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
In regard to the CRM, one of the things that we've been doing again with that centralized area is, one thing I harp on all the time is choosing what not to do. That's really the hard thing. What are we not going to do so we can focus on things? And they've been clamoring for a real CRM. And I've always said, this stuff isn't magic. What are you going to do with it? Who are you going to use it? How is it going to happen? And in terms of student retention, everybody says, well, we do X, Y, and Z, contact and all that kind of stuff. And say, but is it mapped out? Can you really understand what is the response you're expecting? How are you going to react to that response? How are you going to hand it over to the next department or business area to be able to keep that student, focused and supporting the student. So what I've been doing is saying we are not going to go buy a CRM until we map all the business processes in our organization that have to do with student retention. What are we doing it? Why are you doing it? What is the intent of it? When do you start? Do you start, we start, from, well, cradle to grave, because we want people who give us money as they get older. But what does that look like? So, and what's really happening is I finally got the school to understand this. And so it's interesting to watch them struggle with it in a good way, because it's like we're building UML diagrams with, with the business process mapping. And when they see it on the wall, they realize that what's in their head is not really what they're doing. And the shared understanding of people in the same area is not shared understanding until you see it physically and go, wait, we really do that? Oh, we're doing this, and, and getting all of that mapped out. So once we get those processes done, which I think is gonna, we've been working on it for a while, so it's gonna be at least another 6 months to be able to understand who we are. Because I don't think we can determine how we're going to use something unless we know who we are, how we work, what we're doing, and what is the intention we're trying to get. And then how do we measure it? How do we know that we're really being effective? So taking the whole, and what's really interesting is because we're all remote, we're really finding interesting crevices and cracks between the communication, right? Because now as we talk to each other, it's really been helpful. I hate to say that this is a good thing, but the fact that we have been shoved out like this and have to communicate effectively and intentionally and with a vision that is shared across the organization, has been great. Like we had our sprint review yesterday. So every area of the business comes in and presents to the entire, I keep saying business, the instructors get mad at me, but to the entire business, to be able to show, well, we worked on this and we worked on this. We collaborated with this business area and this business area. And we show all the work that's being done. And it is really interesting that even though we're isolated from each other, it really creates a sense of community within the organization that, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on. And we are creating the new normalcy.
Well, and that's what they say. There's a very interesting book, I don't know if any of you have read it, called The Medici Effect. I think the subtitle is The Impact of Pandemic and Elephants on Innovation. And it's just exactly that. When things really change dramatically and it's really out of our control, how do we respond with our creativity? And that sounds very much like one of those ways, Michael. And I did want to tell a story about CRM. The very first CRM implementation I did many, many years ago, I was actually one of the implementers of the software. And I said to folks, so where's your communication plan? And they said, where's our what? They said, doesn't it come with that? I was like, no, I don't really think you want me writing your entire communication plan. It was a big learning curve for that particular school. It was very interesting. I found it one of the ongoing challenges. Not only do we not know our processes, but we often don't know what it is we truly want to say. And we think, well, if we send an email, then we've communicated. And I would beg to differ quite dramatically on that. I don't know what others think. I see you nodding, Tom. So I think that there's some commonality in that theme, and it's very interesting what I'm hearing your school is doing, Michael. It's a very interesting approach. We're getting towards the end of the hour. I don't know, Stephen, if anything else has shown up in the chat, or if there's anything that you want to add, or if there's anything anyone would like to ask at this point, but I'm kind of feeling like we could open it up a little bit and see.
Yeah, let's open it up. If there's any, other questions, any other thoughts for the panelists that they can share their insights that they've worked through. Anything out there?
Or if anyone has something interesting to contribute to the dialogue in the form of an observation or an anecdote about what's going on at your school, that would be lovely as well.
Yeah, please feel free to come off of mute instead of trying to type it out.
This is Tom Hausman. Hello, everyone. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Milwaukee Area Technical College, downtown Milwaukee. We have about 5 teaching locations, metropolitan district. Just a quick rundown. I'm echoing a lot of the great ideas I've heard here, and I can offer some insights that are distinct to our population of students. Very briefly, we're a colleague Unidata shop, but we're hosted with Ellucian. We introduced Help Desk Chat which had not existed in the past, which turned out to be quite effective. We happen to be a G Suite shop. In the rush immediately after the C-19 closure, we distributed about 1,300 Chromebooks gratis to students on a first come, first served basis, which there were interesting logistical challenges there, but it got done. We had a VDI farm that was already operational, but the distinctive thing with respect to serving our students that required GIS and AutoCAD type products, we're using a product called LabStats. We'd already had deployed that in an effort to reduce our lab footprint, but a new feature enables remote desktop access to our computer labs using LabStats. So what this means is that anyone with a browser-capable device can come in and begin using high-end software tools. We had our folks test that with our EET faculty and others, and it's worked very well. So some of the challenges that we're still looking forward to is we're also not making good use of our document management system. We had kind of a castle and moat protection system on campus as opposed to having a lot of VPN setups. We have a relatively high number of incompletes in certain academic programs. And to put the best construction on it, we're hoping to regularize some of our retention efforts and communication plans around that. But that's the high level.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I'm intrigued by the lab stats comment. I've been actually working at school sorting out some of those lab issues, and I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that. That's interesting. Interesting.
No, it was
Others?
It was an unexpected surprise, but it's gone very well.
What do you use for document imaging right now?
Right now, we're an ImageNow WebNow shop. Unfortunately, most of the folks are dependent upon a desktop client, and consequently, we have not been able to re-architect our workflows very well. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I was really cautious about during this is we had some specific needs for e-signature, and I didn't want. The word I always use around here is we want to do things that are sustainable. And you know, there's lots of pieces to that. But, you know, we've been really talking more in depth about how the e-sig ties to our document imaging solution. So I was just curious. That was an interesting comment to me. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions, thoughts, anything you want to get on the table that you may be working through while we have this group of CIOs?
Are any of the schools considering any approach or strategy for testing students that were returning?
I have an afternoon phone call out for secure testing on just that point.
It's a big discussion in EDUCAUSE too. I don't think anybody's figured that out yet. We're going to have to, but actually the biggest strategy for testing is what kind of testing are you doing? How are we assessing? But the traditional test could go the way of everything else here. But if somebody's just putting out the same tests online that they did in the classroom, there's really not a lot of ways yet to secure the endpoints there. I think this is going to be a big change for us. The only other point I would add too, though, is you know, it doesn't look like we're going to get out of this situation soon. And one of the most important things for us as IT leaders to do is make sure that our IT staff are performing relevant functions in a new world. I mean, and we've already pivoted some, but there's going to be budget cuts, and we need to protect our people to make sure they're performing viable things, or maybe they don't, you know, maybe their old roles aren't as important as they used to be. But this looks like it's going to be more prolonged. We could be back online really quickly in the fall if we don't start online in the fall. So it's all the more important to play a key leadership role and an influencer on your campuses now. So I wish us all well.
Okay, great. Any last thoughts? Anyone else as we wind down? All right. If not, we want to thank everyone for joining. Obviously, we want to thank our panelists as well for providing great insights and dialogue and conversation that we all seem to be having, and being able to bring that to the forefront. We truly appreciate it. If anyone does have any additional content or thoughts for what we can kind of bring to the community, further, Forelli is continuing to try and drive that. So please feel free to either reach out to one of us, reach out through info@forelli.com. We would love to hear about any information if you think that it's pertinent to the broader higher ed community. We love it. So thank you so much for everyone's time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.